what everybody sees.
Amazing.
Mike and I are seeing what everybody sees, because This Is Not Advice, we always have a little backstage in the beginning. So hi, everybody. Welcome back. We are here for another one of your questions about work. And as folks know, it's one of my favorite things is when we get to talk to a founder who we've had the pleasure of getting to back. And so Mike was one of the co-founders of a company called Intricately that helped sellers in a B2B context to prospect, which is the term of art for finding and reaching out to their customers. And Mike is now at the company, executive at the company that acquired them. And Mike, thank you for being here. And the question we want to talk about today is, how should I find my customers?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, Roy. For the audience gathered here, it's all true. Yes, Bloomberg Beta was an early investor in us and a phenomenal partner throughout the process. And so just to talk about Intricately in the space broadly for like a really quick second, we collected data about businesses, about business infrastructure. So the way Google Maps maps the physical world, we map the digital world. So our customers sold cloud infrastructure and software, and they'd use our data about businesses to assess the potential. So how much is somebody likely to spend? The priority, how should I sequence or go after them? And then most importantly, the propensity, how likely are they to buy? So
say those three again. Together, I feel like there was 3 P's in there, but they went by fast enough.
I love the alliteration. It's propensity, priority, and you caught me on the
can't remember the third one either.
Wait, sorry, you got me.
It's all good.
Propensity and priority.
That's all good.
You kind of go
customers.
From there, but
yeah,
exactly right. But the idea is, how do I sequence who I should go after? What's the right way to reach out to whom and when? What do I say? It's this notion of really, again, the priority, the propensity, and the prospectability to some extent, going after that third P there. But really, what we'd help customers is, how do you use that data? How do you use it to assess what your customers look like? And so the question that we're talking about today, do you really know your customer? In the beginning of a business, you've got to find customer number one. And chances are, if you started a business in the enterprise space like we did, we knew our early customers really well. They had the same problem we did. So they were businesses that sold technology that were trying to find their next best prospect, their customer, whoever that might be. As you grow from customer 1 to customer 10 and customer 100, this gets harder. And so the question is, do you ever really know your customer? And I think what we're advocates for, and what we were advocates for in our business, is using data to balance out the art and science that is selling something. The art part is, go ahead, Roy.
No, finish your thought.
I was just going to talk about the art part is really being able to get in front of somebody and articulate to them why what you have can help them. The science part is, when do you get to them? When's the right time? How do you position that? These questions of propensity or about priority or wherever we were earlier, being able to put that all together. And so I think our focus has always been there. And so for customers or people that are starting a business today, you have to be able to balance, hey, I've made something that solves a problem with, how do I find the maximum number of people who have this problem? And I think that's where this question of, do you really know your customer, gets important. But I'll hand it to you, Roy.
And so I think one of the questions that a lot of folks face, sometimes data are available about customers, sometimes less so. Depends what you count as data. You can usually find like an email list of people to reach or something like that. And a lot of folks think, if somebody will buy my product, they're my customer. And I have the sense that you believe in something much narrower than that. So whether data or not are available, I think what's implied here is, before you find the customer, you have to figure out who you're looking for. And so in what ways do they look similar to the customers you already have versus different? Like, are you trying to find the widest range of customers possible? Or are you trying to find lookalikes for the customers you already have? Like, what's the right way for somebody to think about that?
Yeah, so I think part of that is dependent on maturity of where you're at in the process, right? Let's think about when we were an early startup and we had one customer, right? One lowly customer. They were amazing, but they were our only precious customer. When we went to customer 2, obviously we couldn't do a lot of lookalike analysis to identify what does customer 2 look like. But what we were experts on, and what I would encourage other entrepreneurs to be experts on, is you have to have mastery in your problem. I think solutions come and go over time, but what I mean by mastery of the problem is we intimately understood the problem we solved for customer number 1. And we had to build almost a process to find customer 2 who had similar problems. Fortunately, our problem that we solved was, helping marketers identify, again, maybe their next best prospect in a narrow space, so we could do that. So to the question you asked, do you want to sell to the largest number of people who might have a little bit of your problem? Maybe, but that seems hard, right? Because you don't want to be kind of meaningful to a lot of people. You want to be really important, I think, to the smallest or ideally largest number of people. But in the beginning, I think you want to be really concentrated. So I think that the core exercise as a founder is, first, of course, you have to know your customer, but I think you have to be really honest about your offering, your product, and being intimate with that problem specifically, so that you can be very narrow. And again, I'd rather be an inch wide and a mile deep than the reverse of that. So the answer to your question, I think, is you have to really understand your customer, but I think you have to be really almost ruthless about what problem you're trying to solve, because it's very hard
only
to
go
solve
to
lots of
people for
problems.
whom that problem is like a piercing. I mean, we sometimes talk in the startup world about selling things that are painkillers, not vitamins. Go to the people who feel the pain so you can be the painkiller. And so here's a frequent thing that happens both for founders and for just salespeople or people who have their own small business that they're trying to grow. They have a bunch of customers who seem different from each other, and they all seem happy for somewhat slightly different reasons, but they're different in different ways. Like maybe they do all have the same problem, but some of them might be huge companies. Some of them might be a single person. Some of them, they might be charging by the hour. Some of them, they might be charging for software. And there's just kind of a mix of things. Let's talk about that next phase of maturity when you have a handful of customers and there's some differences between them. Then how do you figure out who you go after next?
So the term of art, or maybe science, you might hear, and you'll hear sometimes is what's the use case? And in the marketing context, the way that word tends to get used is, does this customer or this prospect have a use case that resonates with my product, right? Because what you may find is there's big companies, like we sold to some of the largest hyperscalers in the world. We also sold to small SaaS startups who had software that basically ran on top of those hyperscalers. So both of them, in both those cases, were trying to find businesses who had migrated to the cloud. But then conversely, we also worked with data center customers who wanted to find businesses who hadn't yet gone to the cloud. So I think what you really have to be selective about is the shape or the size of the business matters less than, does the customer have the need for what you're offering? And what you find is different roles inside big companies and small companies. I might frame that a little bit differently, but the end result is similar. You go back
Yeah,
to
there's
where we
sometimes
started the
lots of differences of
conversation.
willingness to pay, though, and things like that can make it really hard to juggle. And so I think what I hear you saying about an inch wide and a mile deep is, mile deep means a lot of value to those customers without a lot of variation in exactly how you work with them.
Yes, and I'll give you an intellectual razor of sorts that I use on this problem, which is, regardless of if you're dealing with small companies or big companies, something we focused on is the ASP, which means the average sales price, however much our prospect sold the thing for, as long as it was above a sufficient level, meaning let's say their
if they could
service
pay you
cost
enough, you were
$100,000.
willing to, meaning their price that they charged their customers was the thing that drove.
Yes.
I see. So you were looking at the profitability of their business as one indicator for what they could afford to pay you.
Exactly right. And so when we think about, do we know our customer, one of the questions we'd ask is, how much do you charge for your product and how big is your market? Because that at the bare minimum says, hey, this company can afford our product. And so that creates a floor in your pricing that says, hey, I don't have to figure out how to sell my thing for $99 a month if it's worth $50,000 a year
to the customer. Well, I think it's really powerful to think about what problem they're trying to solve in their own business, because that helps you understand, and a similar thing, we've often said, like, it's hard selling to media companies because they're generally poor. And so customers that are poor, tough to sell to them. All right. So now we've talked about how to identify who the customer should be, but let's get to the actual finding and maybe tell us some of the tricks of the trade of, like, hey, I've got a list, and maybe that list looks like, I don't know, maybe that list looks like natural food companies. I know you used to be a food entrepreneur. Maybe that list looks like B2B SaaS companies. Maybe that list looks like individual, I don't know, somebody selling something to doctors and they want to find individual doctors. What are the tricks for, it's like, okay, now I have this theoretical description. How do I find them?
Yeah. So let's just for a second unpack this concept of kind of marketing maturity, where your business is from the standpoint of finding your next customer. In the beginning, again, you have one or two customers. you're kind of grasping. It's a little bit harder to see, right? But once you get to 10 or 15 or 20 or even 100, to the question you asked me earlier, can you look at lookalikes and say, hey, a lot of my customers look like this? What if I got a list that said, hey, if 20 of my companies, to your point, are natural food companies, maybe I want to contact every natural food company in the world, right? That's one way you could do that. Most of my career has been in the software space. And so one of the nice things about looking at things across the software space is things tend to get added sequentially. So a common thing our customers might do is say, hey, all the customers that bought our product, can we look at a company like my former company's data set, which would let you see as products got added over time, what they bought right before ours. So we could assess companies based on my end customers or prospects' maturity about if they bought product A, we think they're going to buy product B. And if my potential customer is product B, they want the list of everybody that bought product A. And so that's one way you'll see it quite a bit. The other term you may hear is something called an ICP. That's an ideal customer profile. That's predominantly like a marketing term, not a salesy term. And what that is the attribute list of what your best prospects look like. Where physically are they located? What kinds of things do they buy or are they interested in? What are the roles or the titles that pursue that? So that right there is almost like it's like a police sketch of your suspect who hopefully is going to become a prospect. And what that allows you to see is, hey, what are the attributes that are consistent across these businesses? And then it could be things like geography. It could be things like spend level or maturity. But that's how you put that together.
And then, I find that often leads to the creative exercise of like, okay, are they all hanging out at the same conference? Can I find them on LinkedIn by doing a search? Do they have a trade publication that I can advertise in?
Totally.
And as you said in the beginning, sometimes it's just picking up the phone. All right, last thing before we wrap. You suggested that when we talk about how do you really know your customer, that the customer deserves a capital C. Yeah. My grammar brain is offended. Please unoffend my grammar brain. Why does the customer deserve a big C?
So let's just, for the gathered audience here, I've worked with Roy for a number of years now, and Roy is an insane grammar nerd. I'm always on just pins and nails when I write him an email because I know he's judging every choice I make.
I'm not. When it's from you, you're the customer. I judge the emails you wrote to other people.
That's true. That is true. That is a true story. But the reason I believe fundamentally as a CEO or as anyone part of an organization, why you always have to capitalize the letter C for customer is you have to show the customers the respect they deserve. Because when you're in the business of supporting customers, the customer is king. And so it's this, to me, it's just a habit. I make people crazy with it. And
you convinced me.
That was it? Are you
I'm
folded
sold.
like that? That was it?
Because you're saying that there's a particular value in this context where it makes sense. And now we've talked about it. I mean, grammar is just convention, just trying to stick to the convention. All right. Any parting thoughts before we wrap?
No, I would encourage anybody watching, anyone who's starting a business, anyone who's trying to find their first couple customers, the thing you got to do, go on LinkedIn, build relationships with humans. In the beginning, people buy from people they like and things that excite them. So you got to start there. The next step up is when you start to identify why they buy, then you can find more businesses and things like that. But I'd leave you with that. And then my final thought in closing here would be, it was propensity, priority, and potential.
I knew priority
stammered right through it.
No, you're good.
And I wanted to close the loop.
You did great. You brought in the 3 Ps. I mean, what's a sale without 3 of the same letter? And Mike, I still remember when we went to volunteer at a prison coaching entrepreneurship, and you were the inmate's favorite coach, well, the favorite male coach anyway. And this positivity shows a lot. And I'm just excited for whatever's to come next. And for those of you who are here for the first time, we call it This Is Not Advice because Mike doesn't know what you should do in your setting. Neither do I. We're giving you our ways of thinking about it. You'll figure it out for yourself. All right. Ask us more questions, to be continued. And thank you, Mike.